London, 1855. The rain pelted against the carriage windows as it wound through the darkened London streets. Inside, Penelope Kensington pressed her gloved hand against the cold glass, watching as droplets raced each other down the pane. Tonight had been a disaster. Another ball, another series of pitying glances and whispered comments behind fans. 4 years since the scandal, and still London society refused to let her forget. "Chin up, Penny," her Aunt Georgina said softly from across the carriage. "You looked lovely tonight." Penelope forced a smile, lovely enough to be a wallflower for 5 consecutive dances. "The Duke of Blackmore spoke with you," her aunt reminded her. "Yes," and immediately excused himself when Lady Westmoreland approached. Penelope smoothed her pale blue gown, conscious of how the fabric, once fashionable, now showed signs of wear. "I should never have come back to London." The scandal of 1851 had destroyed everything. Once the daughter of respected gentry, Penelope had fallen from grace when her father's crimes were exposed. Charles Kensington had embezzled funds from his position at the Royal Bank, using the money to cover mounting gambling debts. When discovered, he'd taken his own life rather than face prosecution, leaving his wife and daughter penniless and disgraced. After her mother's death 6 months later, from grief, the physician had said, though Penelope knew it was shame that had killed her, Penelope had fled to her aunt's modest home in Bath. 4 years of quiet living, teaching music to support herself and her aunt. 4 years of believing that the whispers might have died down. She'd been wrong. "Perhaps we should return to Bath," Aunt Georgina suggested gently. Penelope shook her head. "We cannot. The cottage is sold. And you know Dr. Morrison insisted London's air would be better for your lungs." Her aunt's persistent cough was worsening, and Penelope would not risk her health. "I shall find work. Perhaps as a governess or lady's companion." But London positions required references, connections, all the things her father's disgrace had stripped from her. "There's always Lord Bentley's offer," her aunt ventured carefully. Penelope stiffened. "I would rather starve than marry that man. His eyes follow me like I am already his possession." The carriage stopped before their modest rented rooms in an unfashionable corner of Mayfair, the best they could afford with their dwindling funds. As Penelope helped her aunt inside, she caught sight of a sealed letter on the silver tray in the hall. Her heart quickened. The paper was expensive, the seal bearing a crest she recognized immediately, the Duke of Barrington. Her hands trembled as she broke the wax. "What is it, my dear?" Aunt Georgina asked. Penelope read the letter twice to ensure she understood correctly. "It's from the Duke of Barrington's secretary. I'm invited to interview as a music tutor for his ward, Lady Charlotte." She looked up, bewildered. "Tomorrow morning." "But that's wonderful," her aunt exclaimed. "The position would be respectable, and I've heard the Duke pays his staff generously." Penelope clutched the letter. "Why would he consider me? After tonight's reception, surely he knows my history." "Perhaps he cares more for your talents than your past," her aunt suggested hopefully. Penelope wished she could believe it. But in her experience, nothing came without a price, especially for a woman with no fortune and a tarnished name. "I shall go," she decided. What choice did she have? The Duke of Barrington's London residence loomed like a fortress against the morning sky. Penelope stood before the imposing entrance, gathering her courage before lifting the brass knocker. She had worn her best dress, a modest grey silk that had belonged to her mother, altered to fit the current fashion as best she could manage with her limited sewing skills. A stern-faced butler admitted her, leading her through corridors lined with ancestral portraits and priceless art. The wealth on display in just one hallway exceeded anything Penelope had ever known, even in her father's most prosperous days. She was shown to a bright music room where a magnificent pianoforte dominated the space. Penelope could not help but run her fingers lightly over the keys, sighing at their perfect tone. "Do you approve of my Broadwood, Miss Kensington?" The deep voice startled her. She whirled to face the doorway, where a tall figure stood watching her. The Duke of Barrington, not his secretary as she had expected. "Your Grace," she cursed, heart hammering. "Forgive me, I didn't hear you enter." Evidently, his voice held no warmth. Penelope had seen the Duke from afar at social gatherings, but never this close. He was younger than she'd thought, perhaps 30, with dark hair swept back from a broad forehead. His features were sharp, aristocratic, with piercing grey eyes that seemed to see straight through her carefully constructed composure. "I understand you're seeking the position of music tutor for Lady Charlotte," he said, remaining by the door as though reluctant to enter the room fully. "Yes, Your Grace." Penelope kept her hands folded at her waist to hide their trembling. "Are you qualified?" The question was blunt, almost rude. "I studied with Maestro Vincenzo in Vienna before," she hesitated, "before my circumstances changed. I've been teaching for 4 years in Bath." "Before your father's disgrace, you mean?" His words were precise, cutting. Penelope flinched but forced herself to meet his gaze. "Yes, Your Grace." "And why should I allow someone with your background to influence my 12-year-old ward?" The contempt in his voice strung. "My father's sins are not mine, Your Grace. My character remains untarnished, even if my name does not." Something flickered in his expression, surprise perhaps at her directness. "Lady Charlotte has driven away 3 tutors in as many months," he said after a moment. "She is willful, stubborn, and determined to return to the countryside where she was raised. Since her parents' death last year, she has refused to accept London as her home." "I understand loss, Your Grace," Penelope spoke softly, "and the difficulty of beginning anew in unfamiliar surroundings." The Duke studied her, his expression unreadable. "Play something," he commanded suddenly, gesturing to the pianoforte. Penelope moved to the instrument, her fingers hovering over the keys. She chose a Beethoven sonata, pouring her emotions into the music as she always did. When she finished, the room was silent save for the lingering notes. "You play with feeling," the Duke observed, his tone neutral. "Music should be felt, not merely heard," she replied. He moved further into the room, though still keeping a careful distance. "The position pays £30 annually, with room and board. You will have Sundays free to visit your aunt. Lady Charlotte requires 2 hours of instruction daily, with additional supervision during evening entertainments when required." Penelope's heart leapt. It was more than she had dared hope for. "Thank you, Your Grace. I shall not disappoint you." "See that you don't." His expression hardened. "Understand this, Miss Kensington. I am entrusting you with my ward's musical education only. You will maintain appropriate distance from the family. You will not join us for meals or social gatherings unless specifically requested. And you will never," his eyes locked with hers, "never enter the west wing of the house. Those are my private quarters and strictly forbidden to staff." The intensity of his gaze made her shiver. "Of course, Your Grace." "One more thing," he moved toward the door. "Should I learn that you have spoken to anyone about matters concerning this household, your dismissal will be immediate and without reference. Is that clear?" "Perfectly," she answered, wondering what secrets the Duke guarded so fiercely. "You begin tomorrow. Miss Winters, the housekeeper, will show you to your quarters." With that, he was gone, leaving only the scent of sandalwood in his wake. Penelope released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. She had secured respectable employment, but at what cost? The Duke's conditions felt more like warnings, his manner more like that of a jailer than an employer. But she had little choice. Her aunt needed medicine, food, warmth. And Penelope needed safety from men like Lord Bentley, whose unwanted attentions grew more persistent with each passing week. The Duke's household offered sanctuary, even if its master seemed determined to keep her at arm's length. Lady Charlotte proved every bit as difficult as the Duke had warned. A small, fair-haired girl with her father's grey eyes, she greeted Penelope with folded arms and a mutinous expression. "I don't need another tutor," she announced when they were introduced in the schoolroom the following morning. "I already play adequately." "Adequately is rarely enough in life," Penelope replied calmly, setting her music sheets on the pianoforte. "Your guardian wishes you to excel." "My guardian wishes me locked away in this mausoleum while he conducts his mysterious business," Charlotte retorted. "I hardly see him except at dinner, where he barely speaks. Do you know, Miss Kensington, that I've lived here 8 months, and he's never once called me by my Christian name?" Penelope's heart softened. The child wasn't merely willful, she was lonely. "Perhaps the Duke finds it difficult to connect with a young lady," Penelope suggested. "Men often do." Charlotte snorted in a most unladylike manner. Henry wouldn't know how to connect with anyone. He's like a statue, cold and perfect and utterly untouchable. The Duke is your cousin, is he not? Penelope asked, curious despite herself. Second cousin. He inherited the title when his brother died 3 years ago. Before that, he was just Lord Henry Barton, the spare who spent his time exploring Egypt and Greece and other dusty places. Now he's the almighty Duke, and just as ancient and mysterious as those tombs he used to excavate. Penelope hid her smile at the girl's dramatic description. Well, Lady Charlotte, shall we prove to the Duke that you are more than merely adequate? I thought we might begin with Mozart. For 3 weeks, Penelope slowly earned Charlotte's trust. The girl was indeed talented, but had lacked proper instruction. More importantly, she was starved for attention and conversation. Penelope found herself looking forward to their lessons, even as she carefully observed the Duke's restrictions. She rarely saw the Duke himself. Occasionally she glimpsed him striding through the hall or entering his carriage, always impeccably dressed, his expression remote. He never acknowledged her beyond the briefest of nods, and she began to wonder if he had forgotten her existence entirely. Until the night of the thunderstorm. Unable to sleep as rain lashed against her window, Penelope decided to fetch a book from the library. The Duke had not expressly forbidden her use of this room, though she typically visited only during daylight hours when he was away from the house. The corridors were dark, lit only by occasional flashes of lightning. Penelope navigated carefully, her single candle casting eerie shadows on the walls. As she approached the library, she noticed light seeping beneath the door. She hesitated, then turned to leave. If the Duke was inside, she would not disturb him. "Enter," came his voice from within, startling her. Penelope pushed open the door. The Duke sat in a leather chair before the fire, a book open on his lap. He wore no jacket, his white shirt open at the collar, his cravat discarded. His dark hair fell across his forehead, giving him a younger, almost vulnerable appearance. "Miss Kensington," he said, closing his book. "It's well past midnight. I apologize for disturbing you, Your Grace. I couldn't sleep and thought to borrow a book." "The storm keeps you awake," he gestured to a chair opposite his. "Please sit. The library is at your disposal." Surprised by the invitation, Penelope perched on the edge of the chair, her candle trembling slightly in her hand. The Duke rose and took it from her, placing it on a side table. "Would you care for brandy? I find it helps on nights like these." "No, thank you, Your Grace." He poured himself a glass before returning to his seat. "How is Lady Charlotte progressing?" "Well, I think she has natural talent and a good ear. She's begun composing simple melodies." A flash of lightning illuminated the room, followed by a violent crack of thunder. Penelope flinched involuntarily. "You're afraid of storms?" There was curiosity in his voice, not mockery. "Not typically, but this one," she trailed off, unsure how to explain that the thunder reminded her of the gunshot that had ended her father's life. The Duke studied her over the rim of his glass. "Lady Charlotte speaks highly of you." A miracle, considering her previous tutors, lasted mere weeks. "She's a bright child, lonely but bright." "Lonely," his brow furrowed. "She misses her parents and the countryside." "And perhaps," Penelope hesitated, aware she might be overstepping, "perhaps she misses the attention of her guardian." The Duke's expression hardened. "I am not suited to nurturing children, Miss Kensington. I provided Charlotte with the best governesses and tutors money can buy. My presence in her daily life would be no benefit." "Children need more than education, Your Grace. They need connection. And you are an expert on what children need." His voice was sharp. Penelope stood. "I've overstepped, forgive me." "Wait," he set down his glass and rose. "Your assessment is likely correct. I am unaccustomed to family life. My own childhood was not one I care to emulate." The admission surprised her. "Perhaps you might simply ask Lady Charlotte what would please her. A ride in the park, perhaps, or an afternoon at the museum." He moved closer, and Penelope became acutely aware of his height, the breadth of his shoulders beneath the fine linen of his shirt. "You've changed her, she smiles now. I hear her playing in the evenings, Beethoven, I believe." Yes, she has a particular fondness for his works. Another flash of lightning, another crash of thunder. This time Penelope couldn't suppress a small cry. Without thinking, the Duke reached for her arm to steady her. The moment his fingers touched her, he withdrew as though burned. "Forgive me," he said stiffly. "I forgot myself." The strange reaction puzzled her. "It's quite all right, Your Grace." "No," his voice was harsh now. "It is not all right. You should return to your room, Miss Kensington, immediately." Confused and a little hurt by the sudden dismissal, Penelope cursed. "Of course." "Good night, Your Grace." As she closed the library door behind her, she caught a glimpse of the Duke pouring himself another brandy, his knuckles white against the crystal decanter. "You must come with me to Somerset House," Charlotte declared the following week, bursting into the music room where Penelope was arranging sheet music. "Henry has agreed to take me to see the exhibition of Italian paintings, and he said you might accompany us if you wish." Penelope stared at the girl in surprise. "The Duke suggested I join you." "Well, not precisely," Charlotte admitted. "I suggested it, and he didn't refuse, which from Henry is practically enthusiastic agreement." Penelope hesitated. The Duke had been avoiding her since the night in the library. When their paths crossed in the house, he would bow stiffly and continue on his way, never meeting her eyes. "I'm not certain it would be appropriate, Lady Charlotte." "Please," the girl's eyes pleaded. "Henry barely speaks when we're alone together." "But he talked to you that night in the library." Penelope flushed. "You know about that." "I couldn't sleep either. I saw you both from the gallery. You were discussing me, weren't you?" She looked hopeful. "He's been different since then. He asked me to ride with him in the park yesterday." The news warmed Penelope's heart. "That's wonderful. So you'll come, please say yes. I've never been to an exhibition before, and I'm terribly nervous." How could she refuse? If the Duke has no objection, then yes. The outing was scheduled for the following afternoon. Penelope wore her best day dress, a modest lavender silk that had once belonged to her mother. She had stayed up late the previous night, adding fresh lace to the collar and cuffs, hoping to look respectable enough to accompany a Duke and his ward in public. The Duke was waiting in the entrance hall when she descended the stairs. He wore a perfectly tailored black coat, his cravat impeccably tied, every inch the aristocrat. His eyes widened slightly when he saw her, quickly masked by a return to his usual inscrutable expression. "Miss Kensington," he bowed. "I trust Charlotte explained the arrangements." "Yes, Your Grace. It's most kind of you to include me." "It was Charlotte's wish," he said, his tone neutral, "and the exhibition may prove educational for her musical studies." Charlotte appeared then, resplendent in a new blue dress. The contrast between the Duke's ward, dressed in the finest materials money could buy, and Penelope in her altered hand-me-down was stark. For the first time in weeks, Penelope felt the full weight of the social gulf between them. The exhibition was crowded with London's elite. Heads turned as the Duke entered with his ward and the plainly dressed woman behind them. Penelope caught whispers as they passed. "Isn't that the Kensington girl? Her father was that banker who—" "What is she doing with the Duke of Barrington? Surely he wouldn't." Penelope kept her eyes forward, her back straight. She would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her discomfort. Charlotte, oblivious to the undercurrents, chatted enthusiastically about the paintings. The Duke guided them through the exhibition, occasionally offering insightful comments about the artwork. His knowledge impressed Penelope. Clearly, his travels had educated him beyond what most English gentlemen experienced. They paused before a dramatic painting of a storm at sea. Charlotte moved ahead to examine the next canvas, leaving Penelope momentarily alone with the Duke. "You're uncomfortable," he observed quietly. "People are talking," she replied, keeping her voice low. "About me, about why I'm with you." "Let them talk," his voice was firm. "You have nothing to be ashamed of." "Don't I? My father stole from the very institution that protects your wealth. Society believes his sins flow in my blood." The Duke studied her face. "Do you believe that?" "No," she whispered. "But it hardly matters what I believe." "It matters to me. The words were so quiet she almost missed them. Before she could respond, a woman's voice called out, "Henry." What a delightful surprise. Penelope turned to see an exquisitely dressed woman approaching, her golden hair arranged in elaborate curls beneath a feathered hat. Lady Josephine Westwick, daughter of the Earl of Huntingdon, and if gossip was to be believed, the woman most likely to become the next Duchess of Barrington. "Lady Josephine," the Duke bowed, "what brings you to Somerset House?" "Art nourishes the soul, doesn't it?" She smiled brilliantly, her eyes sliding past Penelope as though she were invisible. "And who is this lovely young lady? Your ward, I presume?" She gestured to Charlotte, who had returned to the Duke's side. "Lady Charlotte Barton," the Duke confirmed, "and her music tutor, Miss Kensington." Lady Josephine's smile dimmed fractionally as she finally acknowledged Penelope with the briefest of nods. "How progressive of you to bring your staff to cultural events." The contempt in her voice was unmistakable. Penelope felt her cheeks burn. "Miss Kensington is more than staff," Charlotte piped up, her young face indignant. "She's my friend and the finest musician in London." The Duke placed a hand on Charlotte's shoulder. "Indeed, Miss Kensington's musical knowledge enhances our appreciation of the visual arts." Lady Josephine's laugh tinkled like glass. "Of course, how enlightened." She touched the Duke's arm possessively. "You must call at Huntingdon House soon, Henry. Father asks after you constantly, perhaps Thursday for dinner." "I regret I'm otherwise engaged," the Duke replied smoothly. "Charlotte has her pianoforte recital that evening. Miss Kensington has been preparing her diligently." Penelope stared at him in confusion. There was no planned recital. "How unfortunate," Lady Josephine pouted. "Another time, then." She departed with a rustle of expensive silk. "A recital?" Charlotte asked once Lady Josephine was out of earshot. "What recital?" "The one you'll be giving Thursday evening," the Duke replied. "For myself and Miss Kensington. Consider it practice for when we host a proper musical evening later in the season." Charlotte's face lit up. "Really, a musical evening? With guests? If your playing warrants it." His lips curved in what might almost have been a smile. "What do you think, Miss Kensington? Is she ready for a small audience?" Penelope nodded, still processing the exchange with Lady Josephine. "With a few more days of practice, certainly." As they left the exhibition, Penelope found herself walking beside the Duke while Charlotte skipped ahead. "You didn't need to defend me," she said quietly. "I wasn't defending you, I was stating facts." He glanced down at her. "Does it bother you that I refused Lady Josephine's invitation in favor of Charlotte's recital?" "Should it? Society expects me to court her. She is the Earl's daughter, beautiful, accomplished, with an impeccable lineage." "And a distaste for music tutors," Penelope added dryly. This time the Duke did smile, a brief, genuine expression that transformed his severe features. "Precisely why I find her company less stimulating than yours and Charlotte's." The compliment warmed her more than it should have. Spring gave way to early summer, and with it came subtle changes to the Duke's household. Charlotte's impromptu recital had been such a success that the Duke arranged a small musical evening with a dozen guests. Charlotte had performed beautifully, and afterward the Duke had insisted Penelope play as well. Her rendition of Chopin had earned enthusiastic applause, even from Lady Josephine, who seemed determined to maintain her connection to the Duke despite his increasingly obvious disinterest. More significantly, the Duke began joining Charlotte and Penelope for afternoon tea several times a week. These informal gatherings became the highlight of Penelope's days. The Duke revealed a dry wit and intelligence that had been hidden behind his reserved demeanor. He spoke of his travels in Greece and Egypt, described ancient temples and mysterious hieroglyphs, and listened with genuine interest when Penelope shared her knowledge of classical composers. One afternoon in June, as they sat in the garden watching Charlotte attempt to sketch the rose bushes, the Duke turned to Penelope with an unusually serious expression. "I've been meaning to ask you something, Miss Kensington." Her heart quickened. "Yes, Your Grace." "Would you consent to call me Henry when we are in private company? Your Grace feels unnecessarily formal after all these months." The request startled her. "I'm not certain that would be appropriate. I am, after all, your employee." "You are Charlotte's tutor," he corrected, "and I would hope something approaching a friend to me." Friend, the word both pleased and pained her. For Penelope had been fighting a losing battle against her growing feelings for the Duke, for Henry. His rare smiles, his unexpected kindnesses, the intensity of his gaze when he thought she wasn't looking, all had conspired to make her care for him far more than was wise. "Very well, Henry," she said, testing the name on her lips, "but only when we are alone with Charlotte." His eyes warmed. "Thank you, Penelope." The sound of her given name in his deep voice sent a shiver through her. Their newfound ease with each other did not go unnoticed by the household staff. Penelope overheard whispers among the maids, speculating about the Duke's interest in the music tutor. Miss Winters, the housekeeper, began watching Penelope with suspicious eyes. "You should be careful," Charlotte warned one day during their lesson. "Miss Winters told Mrs. Phillips that your position here is precarious." "What do you mean?" Penelope asked, though she feared she knew. Charlotte shrugged. "People talk. They say Henry has developed an attachment to you." "That's nonsense," Penelope said firmly, though her heart fluttered at the thought. "Your cousin values my teaching abilities, nothing more." "He smiled yesterday at dinner," Charlotte replied. "Twice. He never smiled before you came." Penelope changed the subject, unwilling to encourage such dangerous speculation. But later that night, alone in her room, she confronted the truth she'd been avoiding. She was falling in love with Henry Barrington, Duke of Barrington. A man so far above her station that any attachment between them would be considered scandalous at best, and at worst, evidence of her moral corruption. She must guard her heart more carefully, for both their sakes. Her resolve was tested the very next day when a letter arrived from Bath. Her aunt's health had taken a turn for the worse. The physician recommended a course of treatment at a specialist hospital in Switzerland, treatment they could never afford. Penelope sat in the music room, the letter clutched in her trembling hands when Henry entered. "Penelope, Charlotte said you cancelled your lesson. Are you unwell?" His voice held genuine concern. She hastily wiped away her tears. "It's my aunt. Her lungs. The doctor says she needs treatment abroad." He crossed to her side. "What treatment? Where?" "A sanatorium in Switzerland, but it's impossible. The cost." She shook her head. "How much?" he asked simply. Penelope stared at him. "I couldn't possibly." "How much, Penelope?" She named the sum, an astronomical amount that represented years of her salary. Without hesitation, he said, "I'll arrange it immediately. Your aunt will have the best care available." "No," she stood, shaking her head. "I cannot accept such charity." "It's not charity, it's," he faltered, "consider it an advance on your salary. It would take me 10 years to repay you." His eyes met hers. "Then you'll simply have to remain in my household for 10 years. The intensity of his gaze made her breath catch. This was dangerous territory. "People would talk," she whispered. "Let them." His hand reached for hers, then stopped, hovering just inches away. "Penelope, I—" The door opened abruptly. Miss Winters stood in the doorway, her face rigid with disapproval. "Your Grace, Lady Josephine has arrived. She's waiting in the blue drawing-room." Henry withdrew his hand. "Thank you, Miss Winters. I'll be there shortly." When the housekeeper had gone, he turned back to Penelope. "We'll discuss this later. For now, please allow me to help your aunt, as a friend, if nothing else." How could she refuse when her aunt's life might depend on it? "Thank you," she said simply. He nodded and left to attend to Lady Josephine, leaving Penelope with a tumultuous mix of gratitude, hope, and fear. 2 nights later, Penelope woke to strange sounds coming from the West Wing, the forbidden section of the house where the Duke kept his private apartments. A rhythmic thumping, followed by what sounded like breaking glass. She sat up in bed, listening. The house was otherwise silent. The staff quarters where she slept were separated from the family wing by a long corridor, but the noises carried clearly in the quiet of the night. Another crash, followed by what might have been a cry of pain. Concern overrode caution. Wrapping her dressing gown tightly around her nightdress, Penelope lit a candle and crept from her room. The corridors were dark and silent as she made her way toward the west wing. The sounds grew louder as she approached the Duke's study. Flickering light showed beneath the door. She hesitated, remembering his strict warning never to enter this part of the house. But what if he was injured? What if someone had broken in? Another crash decided her. She knocked softly. "Your Grace, Henry. Are you all right?" No answer, but the thumping stopped. Gathering her courage, Penelope turned the handle. The door was unlocked. The scene that greeted her was one of chaos. Books lay scattered across the floor. A crystal decanter had shattered against the wall, leaving shards of glass glittering in the firelight. And in the center of the destruction stood Henry, his shirt torn open, his hair wild, his eyes fevered and unfocused. "Henry," Penelope gasped, rushing to his side. "What's happened? Are you hurt?" He stared at her as though he couldn't quite place her. "Penelope. You shouldn't be here." His words were slurred, his breathing labored. "You're ill," she said, reaching to touch his forehead. He was burning with fever. "Let me fetch Dr. Morrison." "No," the word was a command. "No doctor. I forbid it." "But you're unwell, your temperature." "It will pass," he said, swaying slightly. "It always does." "What will pass? Henry, please, let me help you." He laughed bitterly. "No one can help me. Especially not you." He stumbled backward, collapsing into a chair. "Go back to your room, Penelope. Forget what you've seen tonight." "I will not leave you like this," she insisted, moving closer despite his warning. In the firelight, she could see his face clearly now. His skin was flushed, his pupils dilated. But most alarming was the network of raised scars visible on his chest where his shirt hung open, strange, geometric patterns that looked almost like ritual markings. "What happened to you?" she whispered, instinctively reaching toward the scars. He caught her wrist. "Don't." His grip was like iron, though his hand trembled. "Don't touch me, not tonight." "You're hurting me," she said quietly. Immediately he released her, horror washing over his features. "Forgive me. Please just go before." "Before what?" He closed his eyes, his breathing ragged. "Before I do something unforgivable." Understanding dawned. The Duke's strange behavior, his insistence on keeping his distance, his self-imposed isolation in the West Wing, it all pointed to a terrible secret. "This is why you warn me never to enter the West Wing," she said softly. "These episodes, they happen regularly." He nodded once, his jaw tight. "Every month since Egypt." "Egypt." A shudder ran through him. "A tomb, a curse. You wouldn't believe me if I told you." "Try me," she challenged gently. His eyes met hers, filled with a mixture of pain and something darker, more primitive. "I was part of an expedition to explore a newly discovered tomb near Thebes. The hieroglyphs warned of a curse upon any who disturbed the sarcophagus, but I was young, arrogant. I thought such superstitions beneath me." Another spasm shook him. Penelope waited, not daring to interrupt. The local workers refused to enter the burial chamber. My companions and I proceeded alone. Inside, we found treasures beyond imagining, and a sarcophagus covered in strange symbols. When I touched it, he trailed off, his eyes distant with memory. There was a flash of light, pain unlike anything I've ever known. When I woke, these marks were on my chest, and my companions were dead. Penelope's mind reeled. The story sounded like something from a Gothic novel, not reality, yet the evidence of his suffering was undeniable. "Since that night, every month when the moon is full, the fever comes," he continued. "With it, a rage I can barely control, a hunger." He looked away. "I lock myself away to protect others, to protect you." "From what?" she asked, though part of her didn't want to know the answer. "From me." His voice dropped to a whisper. "From what I become." Penelope knelt before him, taking his fevered hands in hers. "Let me help you. Whatever this is, you needn't face it alone." "You don't understand," he said, his voice breaking. "The curse, it makes me want things. Crave things." "What things?" she pressed. His eyes, when they met hers, were dark with an emotion she couldn't name. "You, Penelope, it makes me want you." The confession hung in the air between them, dangerous and thrilling. I've stayed away, he continued hoarsely. I've sworn not to touch you, not to taint you with this darkness inside me, but each month it becomes harder to resist. Penelope's heart raced. Is that why you never? She couldn't finish the sentence. Why I never touch you? Yes, his fingers tightened around hers. I fear if I start, I won't be able to stop. The raw honesty in his voice stirred something deep within her, not fear, but a responding desire she had long suppressed. What if I don't want you to stop? She whispered. His eyes widened. You don't know what you're saying. I know exactly what I'm saying. With trembling fingers, she touched his scarred chest. I'm saying I trust you, Henry, curse or no curse. Penelope, her name was a prayer on his lips. I've tried everything. Physicians, specialists, even those who practice less, conventional medicines, nothing works. Every month I become this, creature of impulse and need. And every month you control it, she pointed out. You lock yourself away rather than risk hurting anyone. That isn't the action of a monster, Henry. It's the action of a good man. He shook his head. You've seen only a fraction of what happens. The worst comes later in the night. Then I'll stay with you through it. No, the word was torn from him. I won't risk you. Penelope rose, decision made. You've helped my aunt without hesitation. Now let me help you. How? The single word contained both longing and despair. Let me stay. Let me see you through this night. If your condition worsens, I promise I'll leave, but perhaps what you need isn't to be alone with this burden. He studied her face, searching for fear or revulsion. Finding none, he slowly nodded. Very well, but you must promise to go if I tell you to. No matter what. I promise, she said solemnly. Throughout the long night, Penelope sat with him as the fever ebbed and flowed. She bathed his forehead with cool cloths, held his hands when tremors shook him, and spoke soothingly when nightmares seemed to grip his mind. As dawn approached, the worst of the episode passed. Henry fell into an exhausted sleep in his chair, his breathing finally regular, his face peaceful for the first time since she'd entered the room. Penelope watched him, her heart full of conflicting emotions. The attraction she felt toward him had only deepened with this revelation of his vulnerability, but the practical part of her mind recognized the impossibility of any future between them. He was a duke. She was a disgraced banker's daughter working as a music tutor. He carried a curse that terrified him. She had nothing to offer but her presence and compassion. And yet, as she watched him sleep, she knew with absolute certainty that she loved him, completely, irrevocably. When he woke as sunlight filtered through the curtains, his eyes found hers immediately. You stayed, he said, wonder in his voice. I promised I would. He reached for her hand, bringing it to his lips. Thank you. The kiss, featherlight against her knuckles, sent warmth spreading through her entire body. The fever has broken, she observed. Yes, until next month. His eyes held hers. Penelope, what you did last night. No one has ever witnessed one of your episodes. Stayed afterward, he corrected. Those who have glimpsed even a hint of my condition have fled in fear or disgust. Then they were fools, she said simply. He smiled, the most genuine, unguarded smile she had ever seen from him. Perhaps they were wiser than you. I don't feel particularly wise at the moment, she admitted. No, his thumb traced circles on her palm, sending shivers up her arm. No, a wise woman would not be sitting unchaperoned in a gentleman's private study at dawn, holding his hand and thinking decidedly unwise thoughts. His smile deepened. What thoughts might those be, Miss Kensington? Before she could answer, a knock at the door startled them both. Henry released her hand as his valet entered, stopping short at the sight of Penelope. Your Grace, forgive me, I didn't realize you had company. Miss Kensington was kind enough to assist me during a difficult night, grave. Please see that she returns to her quarters discreetly. The valet's face remained professionally blank, but Penelope could imagine what he must be thinking. Her reputation, already precarious, would be destroyed if anyone learned she had spent the night in the Duke's private rooms. Of course, Your Grace. Penelope rose, suddenly acutely aware of her state of undress, only a nightgown and dressing gown, and the impropriety of the situation. "We'll speak later," Henry promised softly as she moved toward the door. She nodded, unable to trust her voice. Following Grave through the West Wing corridor, she prayed they wouldn't encounter any other staff. Her prayers went unanswered when they turned a corner and came face to face with Miss Winters. The housekeeper's eyes widened at Penelope's disheveled appearance and the direction from which she had come. Her mouth thinned to a disapproving line. "Miss Kensington, out rather early, aren't we?" "Miss Winters," Penelope acknowledged, her cheeks burning. "His Grace was unwell. I was providing assistance." "I'm certain you were," the housekeeper replied, her tone making clear exactly what kind of assistance she believed Penelope had been offering. "How dedicated of you." Grave cleared his throat. "His Grace requested Miss Kensington's help specifically, Miss Winters. He suffered one of his episodes last night." Something shifted in the housekeeper's expression, understanding, perhaps even sympathy. "I see. Well, you'd best return to your room quickly, Miss Kensington. The maids will be about soon." Penelope hurried to her quarters, her mind racing. The staff clearly knew something of Henry's condition. How much, she couldn't tell, but enough to recognize the significance of his episodes. She changed quickly into her day dress, knowing sleep would be impossible now. Her thoughts kept returning to Henry, to the vulnerability he had shown her, to the curse he believed he carried, to the way his hand had felt holding hers. A terrible suspicion began to form in her mind. What if there was no supernatural curse? What if Henry's monthly episodes were something else entirely, something medical perhaps, the fever, the delirium, the heightened emotions? They resembled descriptions she had read of certain tropical diseases. Could it be that simple? Not a curse from an ancient tomb, but an illness contracted during his Egyptian expedition. She would need to research, to consult medical texts without raising suspicion. If there was even a chance she could help Henry find a cure, she had to try. For now, though, she would keep his secret. Whatever happened between them, she would not betray his trust. The Duke's household buzzed with activity in preparation for Lady Charlotte's birthday celebration. Henry had decided to host a proper ball in her honor, her first introduction to society at the age of 13. Charlotte was beside herself with excitement, practicing her dancing every afternoon with Penelope playing the pianoforte. 3 weeks had passed since the night Penelope had discovered Henry's secret. During that time, their relationship had changed in subtle but significant ways. He sought her company openly now, joining her and Charlotte for music lessons, inviting her opinion on books and art, treating her more as a companion than an employee. They never spoke of what had transpired that night, nor of the feelings that seemed to grow between them with each passing day. But sometimes she would catch him watching her with an intensity that made her heart race, and sometimes their hands would touch, briefly, accidentally, sending electricity through her veins. The morning of Charlotte's birthday, Penelope was summoned to the Duke's study, not in the West Wing, but his public study where he conducted business. He stood as she entered, smiling warmly. "Penelope. Thank you for coming. You wished to see me." She remained by the door, conscious of propriety despite their newfound closeness. "Yes, I have something for you," he gestured to a large box on his desk, "for tonight's ball." She approached cautiously. "What is it? Open it and see." Lifting the lid, Penelope gasped. Inside lay the most exquisite gown she had ever seen, deep blue silk the color of twilight, with delicate silver embroidery along the bodice and hem. Beside it nestled matching slippers, long gloves, and a simple silver necklace. "Henry, I can't accept this," she said, even as her fingers traced the beautiful fabric. "You can and you will," he replied firmly. "Charlotte insisted you attend the ball as a guest, not as staff. And if you're to be my ward's guest of honor, you must be properly attired." "People will talk," she warned. "People always talk. I've ceased to care." His expression softened. "Please, Penelope, allow me this small gesture of gratitude for all you've done for Charlotte, and for me." How could she refuse when he looked at her that way? "Thank you," she whispered. "It's beautiful." "Like its wearer," he said quietly. Their eyes held for a long moment, the air between them charged with unspoken feelings. "There's something else," he said finally. A letter arrived from Switzerland this morning. Your aunt's treatment is progressing well. The physicians are optimistic about her recovery. Joy flooded through Penelope. Truly, oh Henry, that's wonderful news. Without thinking, she moved toward him, stopping just short of an embrace as propriety reasserted itself. He noticed her hesitation and smiled sadly. One day, perhaps you won't need to stop yourself, he said softly. Before she could respond, a knock at the door announced Charlotte's arrival. The moment of intimacy broken, Penelope stepped back as the girl bounded into the room. "Is that my surprise?" Charlotte asked, eyeing the box. "Oh, it's the gown for Miss Kensington. Isn't it perfect?" "I helped choose the colour." "It's lovely, Lady Charlotte," Penelope said, composing herself. "Most generous of you and your guardian." "You simply must wear the necklace too," Charlotte insisted, lifting it from the box. "Henry specifically selected it to match your eyes." Penelope glanced at Henry, who looked slightly embarrassed at his ward's forthright comment. Did he indeed? "Well," he cleared his throat, "I merely thought it complemented the gown." Charlotte rolled her eyes. "He had the jeweller bring a dozen different pieces and spent an hour deciding which suited you best." "Charlotte," Henry warned, though his tone was more amused than angry. "Well, it's true," the girl replied unapologetically. "Now, Miss Kensington, you must come help me practice my waltz one final time before tonight. I'm terrified I'll forget the steps and embarrass myself in front of everyone." As Penelope followed Charlotte from the room, she caught Henry watching her, his expression a mixture of tenderness and something deeper that made her breath catch. The ball was a spectacular affair. The Barrington mansion blazed with candlelight, its ballroom transformed by garlands of summer flowers and ribbons. The cream of London society attended, curious to see the Duke's young ward make her debut, even in this informal capacity. Penelope delayed her entrance, nervous about appearing in such grand company. When she finally descended the main staircase in her blue gown, she was acutely aware of the stares and whispers that followed her. Lady Josephine, resplendent in crimson silk, looked particularly displeased to see the music tutor attired as a guest. Henry stood near the ballroom entrance, engaged in conversation with several gentlemen. He glanced up as Penelope approached, and the expression that crossed his face, surprise, admiration, desire, made her feel more beautiful than any gown ever could. Excusing himself from his companions, he moved to meet her. "Miss Kensington," he said formally, though his eyes conveyed much more, "you honour us with your presence." "Thank you for the invitation, Your Grace," she replied with equal formality, conscious of the watching eyes. "And for your generous gift." "The gown merely enhances what was already there," he said quietly. Then, more loudly for the benefit of those nearby, "Lady Charlotte will be delighted you've joined us. She was asking for you earlier." He offered his arm to escort her into the ballroom, a gesture that caused a fresh wave of whispers. Penelope hesitated only briefly before placing her gloved hand on his sleeve. "People are staring," she murmured as they entered the crowded room. "Let them," he replied, his voice firm. "You have as much right to be here as anyone." Charlotte rushed to greet them, resplendent in pale pink silk. "Miss Kensington." "You look magnificent, doesn't she, Henry?" "Indeed," he agreed, his eyes never leaving Penelope's face. The evening progressed pleasantly despite the occasional cold glance from certain members of society. Charlotte performed her first waltz flawlessly with her cousin, then danced with several young gentlemen deemed appropriate by her guardian. Penelope watched proudly from the sidelines, content to observe the celebration she had helped make possible. "You've transformed her," came a voice beside her. Lady Huntington, the Earl's wife and Lady Josephine's mother, had approached without Penelope noticing. When Charlotte first came to London, she was a wild little thing. Now look at her, the perfect young lady. "Lady Charlotte deserves the credit," Penelope replied cautiously. "She worked diligently to master her lessons." Lady Huntington studied her shrewdly. "And what of her guardian? Has he been equally diligent under your instruction?" Penelope stiffened. "I'm not sure I understand your meaning, my lady." "No," the older woman's smile was knowing. "The Duke has changed these past months. He smiles now, engages in conversation, hosts balls when previously he avoided society whenever possible. She leaned closer. Society wonders what magic you've worked on him, Miss Kensington. I've worked no magic, Penelope insisted. His Grace has simply grown more comfortable in his role as Charlotte's guardian. Is that all? Lady Huntington raised an eyebrow. My daughter is quite disappointed. She had high hopes in that quarter. Before Penelope could respond, the orchestra began a new dance, a waltz. To her surprise, Henry appeared before her, bowing formally. Miss Kensington, would you do me the honor? The ballroom seemed to quiet as heads turned in their direction. Penelope was acutely aware of Lady Josephine watching from across the room, her face tight with anger. Your Grace, I'm not certain that would be appropriate, she said softly. I am certain, he replied, holding out his hand. One dance, Penelope, please. Unable to resist the plea in his eyes, she placed her hand in his. As he led her to the center of the ballroom, she felt the weight of every stare, heard the buzz of shocked whispers. You're creating a scandal, she warned as his hand settled at her waist. No, he said, his voice steady as they began to move to the music. I'm making a statement. What statement is that? His eyes held hers, unflinching, that I value you above their good opinion. They whirled around the floor, his hand firm at her waist, his steps sure and strong. Penelope had never waltzed before, but under his guidance, she felt as though she were floating. For those few minutes, the whispers faded away. There was only music, movement, and the man whose touch sent fire through her veins, despite the layers of fabric between them. When the dance ended, he bowed over her hand. Thank you, he murmured, pressing a kiss to her gloved knuckles. The gesture, so public and deliberate, caused a fresh wave of whispers. Penelope caught Lady Josephine's outraged expression as the woman turned to speak urgently to her mother. I should go, Penelope said, suddenly overwhelmed by the attention. This is Charlotte's night. I don't wish to create a distraction. Stay, Henry urged. Don't let them drive you away. But it was too late. The damage was done. As Penelope made her way to the edge of the ballroom, she overheard snippets of conversation. Just like her father, seducing her way into fortune. Always the quiet ones you must watch. Using the child as an excuse to get close to the Duke. Each word was a knife to her heart. Not for herself, she had endured worse since her father's disgrace, but for what this might mean for Henry and Charlotte. Her presence in their lives was becoming a liability. Unable to bear it any longer, Penelope slipped from the ballroom and hurried upstairs to her room. She removed the beautiful gown carefully, folding it with trembling hands. The necklace she placed back in its velvet box. Then she sat at her small desk and began to write. 2 letters. One to Charlotte, explaining her sudden departure and encouraging the girl to continue her musical studies. The other to Henry, a harder letter to compose, for how could she express what she felt without revealing too much of her heart? In the end, she wrote simply and honestly, Your Grace. By the time you read this, I will have left your household. Please know that my departure is not due to any fault of yours, but rather to protect you and Lady Charlotte from the scandal my continued presence would surely cause. I cannot thank you enough for your kindness these past months. Your generosity toward my aunt has given her a chance at recovery I could never have provided. For that alone, I would be forever in your debt. But it is not gratitude that fills my heart when I think of you. It is something deeper, something I dare not name. Something that makes leaving all the more painful, yet all the more necessary. You once told me that you had sworn never to touch me. Tonight, you broke that vow when we danced. The consequences of that choice were immediately apparent in the reactions of your peers. A duke cannot dance with a music tutor without inviting speculation and gossip. A speculation that can only harm your reputation and, by extension, Lady Charlotte's future prospects. I release you from any obligation you may feel toward me. My aunt's treatment has been arranged, and I have savings enough to secure modest lodgings until I find new employment. Please tell Lady Charlotte that she has been the brightest part of my time in London. Her talent and spirit will carry her far. As for the curse you believe you bear, I remain convinced it is not supernatural in origin. I have consulted medical texts these past weeks and believe your symptoms match those of a rare tropical fever. I've taken the liberty of leaving information about a specialist physician with your valet, Grave. This doctor has treated similar cases among explorers returned from Egypt and may offer help where others have failed. Whether you seek treatment or not, know this: your condition does not make you a monster. It is your choices that define you, Henry, and you have chosen, again and again, to protect those around you, even at great cost to yourself. I wish you every happiness in the life that lies before you, a life that must, by necessity, continue without. Your most humble servant, Penelope Kensington. She sealed both letters, then began packing her few belongings. As the sounds of the ball continued below, Penelope slipped quietly from the house and into the London night. 1 month later, Penelope sat at the small pianoforte in Mrs. Baxter's parlour, demonstrating a simple exercise for her newest pupil. The widow's daughter, a serious child of 8, watched with concentration as Penelope's fingers moved across the keys. "Now you try, Mary," Penelope encouraged, moving aside on the bench. The girl began haltingly, her small fingers pressing each key with deliberate care. Penelope nodded encouragement, her mind only half on the lesson. Since leaving the Duke's household, she had secured a position as a music teacher for the children of several respectable merchant families in Bath. The pay was modest but sufficient for her needs and for supplementing her aunt's care in Switzerland, where she continued to improve. Penelope had received 1 letter from Lady Charlotte, smuggled through a sympathetic lady's maid. The girl expressed her anger at Penelope's sudden departure and reported that "Henry has been absolutely unbearable since you left, scowling at everyone and locking himself in his study for days." The news had brought Penelope both pain and a secret, shameful pleasure. That he missed her meant something, even if nothing could ever come of it. She had heard nothing directly from Henry himself, though rumours reached even Bath about the Duke of Barrington's withdrawal from society and his abrupt cancellation of Lady Charlotte's summer party. Lady Josephine, it was said, had all but given up hope of capturing the Duke's interest, turning her attentions instead to a wealthy viscount recently returned from India. "Very good, Mary," Penelope said as the child completed the exercise. "Practice that daily, and next week we'll add the left hand." As the lesson concluded and Penelope gathered her music sheets, Mrs. Baxter entered the parlour. "Miss Kensington, there's a gentleman asking for you," the widow said, her expression a mixture of confusion and excitement. "A very grand gentleman with a very grand carriage." Penelope's heart stuttered. "Did he give his name?" "The Duke of Barrington, if you please. Says he must speak with you on a matter of great importance." Mrs. Baxter lowered her voice. "I've shown him to the garden. It seemed more proper than the parlour, what with Mary and me being the only ones home." Penelope smoothed her simple grey dress, wishing fleetingly for the blue silk gown she had left behind in London. "Thank you, Mrs. Baxter. I'll attend to him immediately." The small garden behind Mrs. Baxter's house was in full summer bloom, roses and lavender scenting the air. Henry stood with his back to her, a tall, imposing figure in a perfectly tailored black coat. At the sound of her footsteps on the gravel path, he turned. The sight of him after a month's absence hit Penelope like a physical blow. He looked thinner, the angles of his face more pronounced. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, suggesting sleepless nights. "Penelope," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Your Grace," she replied formally, curtsying, "this is an unexpected honour." "Is it?" He moved toward her. "Did you truly believe I would let you disappear from my life without a word?" "You received my letter," she said. "I explained my reasons." "Yes, your very logical, very selfless reasons." His jaw tightened. "Did it not occur to you that I might have something to say about your decision?" "It was not your decision to make," she replied, fighting to keep her voice steady. "My presence in your household was causing talk. Talk that could damage Charlotte's prospects and yours." "I don't care about talk," he said fiercely. "I care about you, about the emptiness you left behind when you fled in the middle of the night like a thief." His words pierced her heart. "I didn't flee. I made a rational choice to remove myself from an impossible situation. Impossible, he stepped closer. The only impossibility I see is trying to live without you. Penelope's breath caught. Henry, please. Don't say things you'll regret. I regret only my silence, he replied. I should have told you how I felt months ago, curse or no curse. And how do you feel? She asked, scarcely able to breathe. His eyes held hers, grey and unflinching. I love you, Penelope Kensington. I have loved you since you played Beethoven that first day in my music room. I have loved you through every lesson with Charlotte, every conversation in the library, every moment you've brought light into my shadowed existence. The words she had longed to hear, yet never dared hope for, washed over her like rain after drought. It changes nothing, she whispered, even as her heart sang. You are a duke, I am. The daughter of a banker who made terrible mistakes, he finished for her. But you are not your father, just as I am not mine. You taught me that, Penelope. You showed me that we are defined by our choices, not our circumstances or our pasts. He reached for her hand, and this time she didn't pull away. The physician you recommended, he continued. Dr. Ainsworth, I consulted him after you left. And, she asked, hope rising within her. You were right, what I've been experiencing isn't a curse. It's a tropical disease contracted in Egypt, a form of malaria that manifests cyclically with the lunar cycle. Dr. Ainsworth has begun a treatment regimen that has already reduced the severity of my episodes. Relief flooded through her. I'm so glad, she said sincerely. You deserve to be free of that burden. I'm not entirely cured, he cautioned. The episodes may continue, though with decreasing intensity. Dr. Ainsworth believes that in time, they may disappear completely. That's wonderful news. It is, he moved closer still, his eyes never leaving hers. But it isn't why I came to Bath. Why did you come then? She asked, though his expression told her everything she needed to know. To ask you a question. He took both her hands in his. Penelope Kensington, will you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife? Though she had begun to hope, the actual words still stunned her. Henry, the scandal would be immense. A duke marrying a disgraced banker's daughter. Society would never accept it. Society can go hang, he said bluntly. I've lived my entire life according to expectations. My father's, my brother's, society's. The only time I've ever been truly happy was with you and Charlotte, in our own small world where titles and backgrounds didn't matter. And Charlotte. What does she think of this? His lips curved in a smile. She threatened to run away to Bath if I didn't come fetch you immediately. She misses her friend almost as much as I miss the woman I love. Tears filled Penelope's eyes. I love you too, she admitted, the words falling from her lips like a sigh. I have for so long. Then say yes, he urged, drawing her closer. Say you'll marry me, scandalize society, and make me the happiest man in England. Yes, she whispered, her heart too full for more words. His hands cradled her face with infinite tenderness. May I kiss you, Penelope? I've sworn for so long not to touch you, but if you're to be my wife. Please, she breathed. His lips met hers, gentle at first, then with growing passion as her arms wound around his neck. All the longing, all the restrained desire of the past months poured into that kiss, leaving them both breathless when they finally parted. I should have done that months ago, he murmured against her hair. We have a lifetime for kisses now, she replied, smiling through her tears. Henry drew back slightly, his expression serious once more. There will be talk, Penelope. Cruel words cut direct, doors closed to us. Are you certain you can bear it? She touched his face, tracing the strong line of his jaw. With you beside me, I can bear anything. And in time, they'll see what I see. Not a duke and a music teacher, but simply a man and woman who found love despite every obstacle. He kissed her again, sealing their promise beneath the summer sky. Behind them, the sound of applause broke the moment. They turned to find Mrs. Baxter and young Mary watching from the parlor window, the widow wiping tears from her eyes with her handkerchief. Henry laughed, the sound carefree in a way Penelope had never heard before. It seems we have our first supporters, he observed. The first of many, she replied confidently. Love has a way of changing minds, given time. And hearts, he added, drawing her close once more. As they stood together in the small garden, planning their future, Penelope knew there would be challenges ahead. Society would not easily accept their match. The disease Henry carried might never fully disappear. But for the first time since her father's disgrace, Penelope looked toward tomorrow with hope instead of fear. The Duke had sworn never to touch her, until the night he discovered her hidden compassion, her strength, her ability to see beyond his curse to the man beneath. And in breaking that vow, he had found not damnation, but salvation.